All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel today, Thursday, the 23rd of May. I'll just introduce the panel members. Myself, Karen Hyde, as presiding member. I have Ms. Leo Donoghue, deputy presiding member, Mr. John Symes, specialist member. In the room, Councillor Taran Dewan, elected member for the City of Cockburn, and on screen on Zoom, Councillor Tom Widdenbar, who is feeling unwell today but is going to soldier on and appear on Zoom for us. So thank you for everybody's attendance. I'd like to declare the meeting open, therefore, and acknowledge the traditional owners and pay respects to their elders, past and present, on the land of which the meeting's being held. We may all refer to our technical devices here to assist us during the meeting. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed in accordance with Regulation 42A. So when you are presenting or speaking, please announce your name so that everybody online is aware of that. I'd also just like to express a desire that we respect everybody's time during the presentations and remain quiet, and if at all possible, refrain from applause and interruption during those presentations. Thank you. And I will call people up to speak, those who have requested to make a presentation according to the agenda. So item 2, apologies, we have none. Item 3, members on leave of absence, none. Item 4, noting of minutes. Minutes of previous meetings are available on the website. Declarations of due consideration, now turning to part B of our agenda. Could panel members please respond with a show of hands to express that they've duly considered all matters before us today? Thank you. Councillor Widdenbar, thank you very much. There has even been a late R13, which I'm sure you've all seen as well. Thank you. Disclosures of interest, I've not received any disclosures of items have been to council members and just have declared that they participated in that meeting and that they're not bound by any previous decisions or resolutions and undertake to exercise independent judgment in relation to the matters before you. Did you wish to add anything to that statement? You're comfortable with those statements?
I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you. And Councillor Widdenbart also? Thank you very much. Okay. We'll then turn to the item before us and the presentations that have been requested in respect of that item. Each presenter has been allowed three minutes to make their presentation. And first we have Mr. Chris Kennedy from Aigle Royal, who joins us online. And I think, Mr. Kennedy, you're speaking for the primary resolution in the RNR.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, that's correct.
I'll let you know when you reach your 3 minutes.
Okay, I take it you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, as was stated, my name is Chris Kennedy from Aigle Royal Group. We ask that the committee support the recommendation for refusal of this item. In my view, this is a very well thought out and considered report. We would reiterate that this proposal shouldn't be supported because there is no strategic support or context for it. We'd also state that in relation to additional commercial and retail uses in this area, we already have a strategic location at the corner of Hammond Road, Wattleup Road and Mudgett Drive for these uses. That is the designated centre. That is where these uses should be contemplated, not at the subject site. I think in relation to that point too, I would like to state that we as a group went through a long process of working with the city and working with other stakeholders in order to get the structure planning framework in place for our centre at the corner of Wodgett Road, Hammond Road and Wattleup Road. And we believe we've gone through the correct process of getting structure planning in place and dealing with the issues. In our view, and as stated in the report, there are significant unresolved issues around land use with this proposal that, in my view, cannot be resolved. Importantly, there are also unresolved environmental issues with this proposal that, again, have not been resolved. And again, that speaks to the fact that there is no structure plan in place that would support this application. We ask that this proposal be refused. And again, I reiterate that we support the recommendation before you. We thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I might invite panel members if they have any questions. Yes, please, Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to understand from Mr. Kennedy, how big is the development that's coming up on the corner of Wodgett Road and the Wattleup Road? And also, what's your role in that development? Thank you.
So our role is we are the developers of a supermarket at that site that you mentioned. That site is also capable of supporting fast food outlets. It's also capable of supporting a medical centre as well. So we are the developers of that centre. Now, I think you asked how big our centre is. Our centre is approximately 4,500 square metres NLA. What I'd also add is within that area, there are also a number of vacant sites which are also zoned commercial, which are capable of allowing the uses which are proposed or contemplated, I should say, by this proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of the presenter? All good to proceed with the next set of presentations? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. So
Thank you.
next we have Mr. Neil Teo from Dynamic Planning and the applicant's team. You have about 8 of your team, I believe, who are speaking today. I've therefore allowed you up to 30 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes for that presentation. So hopefully you can move swiftly through, and I'll look to you to organise your speakers in the order that you wish them to. So please, if you'd like to move to the lectern. Panel members, shall we get through all of the team's presentation and then open for questions at the end of that? Yes, comfortable with that. So Mr. Teo, we'll just run smoothly through all of your team's presentation and then open for questions. So over to you. I'll let you know how you're going for time.
Great. Thank you very much, Presiding Member. Thank you, panel members, and welcome to City's offices here. My name is Neil.
You might need to speak up a little bit, I think.
Yes, Neil Teo from Dynamic Planning and Developments. We're here today before you to seek approval for our proposal. So is the presentation?
Sorry, everyone, bear with us. Sorry for the delay, everyone. I think we should be good. I'll just get Regan's email up now. Load for me. Okay. We're out of USB things, so just bear with me, sorry.
So for those online, we're just waiting for the presentation to come up on screen. So.
All right. Sorry for the delay. I just better click through.
Good morning again. Sorry about that.
Good morning. Please start.
IT is not happy today.
Bring it up on the website.
I don't know. I mean, I've got it in the USB if you want, but
Claire, which one was it? Which presentation was it? and it closed down.
Sorry, it's on the email. All right.
Take three. All right. Let's try that again. Good morning, everyone. Neil Teo from Dynamic Planning, and we're here to speak to you about the proposed commercial development at Lot 9501 Glaber Road, Hammond Park. Thank you for the permission for the deputation. I understand we have 30 minutes. We do have quite a bit to get through, so I will try and be very expeditious in this presentation. In terms of our project team, as you can see from the list in front of you, our project team is deep in terms of input and consultants. I won't repeat everything on the screen because it will take too long, but we've got effectively planners, air quality experts, traffic engineering, environmental, retail economists, bushfire, acoustic, hydrology, landscape architects, civil engineers, waste, and sustainability as well. I really will try and introduce John Del Dosso from Broad Vision Projects as the landowner. He's got significant experience as the owner of the land, and he's got some background which he would like to go through. So I'll introduce John.
Good morning, everyone. My name's John Del Dosso. Bit of background, I've been in property for nearly 50 years now. I started my career initially in construction and project delivery for 17 years and then moved into property. I now work for Signet West, and my primary role is providing property consultancy advice, principally to state government and local government, and that advice is tailored mainly towards land use marketability, practicality of land uses, development feasibility. So that's where my professional expertise stands. Second to that, I'm only one member of a small syndicate who purchased this land in late 2005 under a particular set of circumstances that have changed quite significantly over that period of time. And there has been a significant number of changes through the planning system, environmental law, that have affected this site quite materially, which is what has brought us to this position today. Now, I just wanted to touch on a couple of key observations that I wanted to reflect on for the benefit of everyone here. Firstly, the city conducted an information session for the community on the 15th of February. We were specifically requested not to attend. Not being comfortable with that, we actually had someone in attendance who took a record of that session. And our observation is that the session was very biased and it did not present a lot of the facts. And so I wanted to take this time to recap on some of those issues. Firstly, the issue on traffic. The community in attendance was not aware and was not made aware that this is a blue road. It's an other regional road. They weren't made aware that this road will have at some point have 25 to 30,000 cars per day on it. Moreover, they weren't made aware that the trip generation from this project will only be 410 trips in the morning and 658 trips in the evening. So that is inconsequential to the trip effect that it'll generate from 25 to 30,000 cars a day on Hammond Road. There was also a lot of conversation about a number of the walkways that the community presently enjoy, number one being across the frontage of the property. That frontage is actually a carriageway of Hammond Road. Despite our project, that frontage will be torn up and destroyed when Hammond Road is constructed. The planners that presented at this session failed to communicate to the community that Hammond Road will be a dual carriageway. And there are some very good examples of recently completed sections of Hammond Road, north of Russell through to Belia Drive, of which I've put forward a couple of pictures. This is what it's going to look like. It's a dual carriageway, 4 lanes, large central median. It is not going to be a Sleepy Hollow, which is what the community tends to believe it is. Then we talk to sensitive land uses. Here's 2 very good examples of sensitive land uses, right? Childcare is right next to fast food and service station. The city never once put forward to the community that there are actually solutions, technical solutions that deal with these issues. Even yesterday, I was up in Alkimos. A brand new McDonald's and 7-Eleven exists in Alkimos, opposite the Coles Trinity Shopping Centre, directly opposite residential dwellings, separated only by a 15-metre road reserve. These residential dwellings look directly into the McDonald's and the 7-Eleven. There's even 2 driveways off the street in front of those houses. And yet that's been approved and delivered in front of residential. We have no residential or sensitive uses directly around the site. We are a standalone site sitting on a corner, significantly buffered by adjoining development. Some of the examples of that spread and distance, it's easy to look on a plan and go, oh yeah, that's close to the school. But go stand on the corner, take a look down the street, walk around the land. You will actually physically see on the ground that there is a significant separation from the proposed development on this site and surrounding land uses. Many attendants raised issues around the bushland and the wetland. I've called it the sun plant because that's still firmly my opinion. The city didn't inform the community that this whole site was originally zoned urban deferred, that the state government had the opportunity to reserve the wetland as parks and recreation before they changed the zoning to urban, and they chose not to. City had actually put together a scheme amendment number 28 to deal with that issue. It was an issue that would have resolved where we're at today, only for WAPC to reject the city's endorsed scheme amendment 28 and request a change to it. On all technical counts, this is not a wetland, it's a sunplant. When we bought the site, it was full of foxes, full of rabbits, warrens. They do not sleep in the water. Those warrens were in the ground. Even the neighbour next door, his kids have gone and built an underground cubby in the middle of the wetland, as an example. And then, most importantly, this site in the 70s was entirely cleared. Everything on that site is revegetation. There's nothing here of its original form. During the last 50 years, the council built a road through the wetlands, severing the northern section. Wetlands have encroached on the eastern side and in part still exist and still operate adjoining the wetland and the buffer, the designated buffer that is present there. The city approved the construction of the house. And within the buffer, the city approved the construction of the house on the very edge of the wetland. Once the land to the north was severed, they approved construction of other houses in the northern part of the wetland. Ultimately, they chose to change the rating of the wetland to multiple use. But that entire area was conservation category wetland, as identified in the old System 6, going back to the 70s through black and white photography, not through signs. Water Corporation has constructed a sewer line on our side of the road running through the wetland. The council itself, with its own drainage strategy, has actually put a drainage line on our side of the road that is designed to control water levels. This so-called wetland will never have water in it. At best, it is waterlogged. And despite all of these intrusions into the wetland, which goes to the argument of the buffer, the vegetation here flourishes. But we do need to recognise that the majority of species here in this wetland are actually upland species. They're not wetland dependent species. And there too, the argument that this is more of a sumpland than a wetland. Then we look at what the neighbours have done. They have won an approval for a 15-metre buffer. You can see the treatment of the buffer in the photos I've presented. The buffer is illustrated in the subdivision concept in front of you now. But importantly, at the western end, where the buffer is identified as public open space, it's been completely cleared. You go down there, you can zoom in the picture, there's some big steel frames there. Someone's going to construct a gazebo there. This is not going to be revegetated with conservation type flora as we see it today. The drainage sump is no more than 0.5 metres to 0.75 metres deep. It is very clear that the drainage from this residential subdivision will flow into here and it will overflow into the wetland with a 1 in 100 storm. I'm only assuming it's a 1 in 100, it might even be less because that water basin is not very big and it's not very deep. But very clearly, you can see the limestone overflow and water will flow directly into the wetland. We've asked for no more. Our proposal provides for exactly the same. Now, mentioned earlier, we bought this for residential development. We've spent a significant amount of effort in trying to get this developed with an application in 2012, which was refused, an application in 2017, which was supported, but returned to us with modifications which were just unworkable. And so we never proceeded with it. It was unworkable in terms of the feasibility and delivery of the project. Since then, fire regulations have changed significantly again, and this site is undevelopable if it is not cleared. And that's led us to this proposal. But more importantly, after the 2017 modification request from WAPC, we were approached by 7-Eleven and McDonald's. As part of our risk mitigation strategy, given what I know about this area and this industry, I actually referred them to the local centre site to the south. And even subsequent to that, when Aga Royal proposed their shopping centre, I referred them to Aga Royal Centre. I recommended that they go and investigate those sites before coming to us because I didn't want to pour good money after bad. Both of those proponents came back to us and unequivocally told us that they preferred our site, our location, to the extent that we have sale contracts in place with McDonald's and 7-Eleven. More recently, you will have noted that KFC has chosen to move on. We were only advised of that 5 weeks ago, so that's a very recent choice. But I do understand there's an opportunity for them to come back. But notwithstanding, we have alternatives. So the use of the KFC site will not change. It will not change in scale. It will remain a quick service restaurant. It just may not be a KFC. And importantly, before embarking on this journey, again, I've been doing this for a long time. We met with WAPC and the city's planners going back to 2020. Through this entire journey up until January 2023, we received in-principle support for the concepts to the extent that we have verbally agreed that we would not put any retail on our site. The in-principle support came conditioned on we providing quick service restaurants and service station and other non-retail uses to the land, which we have done. And I think it's important to recognise that the retail structure of the local centre plan at Whadjuk and Hammond has been destroyed for a number of reasons. Firstly, the developer to the west, Cube, has completely got rid of the retail development opportunity on the west side of Hammond Road. It's now residential housing. On the east side of the road, there's 2 vacant lots left, which are not controlled by Aga Royal, despite the earlier question. Aga Royal do not control the local centre sites at Whadjuk and Hammond. Those sites are partly developed and currently contain a childcare centre, medical centre, pharmacy and cafe, and part of the site's been applied to parking. It's the retail development at Agra Royals Centre that has destroyed the structure of this local centre planned at Wajak and Hammond. Notwithstanding, in our opinion, the proposal for retail at Wajak and Hammond is supportable. We do not compete with them. We provide only quick service restaurants, service station and commercial style uses. Those sites can continue to deliver a retail use, a retail mixed use, and deliver a piazza style local centre, which the Centre Council originally wanted, and complement what we propose as well as the Agra Royal Shopping Centre. What we propose and what Agra Royal has put together is not going to destroy the efficacy of these two remaining sites to deliver a local centre.
So you're about halfway through your
Look, I think I've
allocated
covered
30
it all, but
minutes.
most importantly, on the last slide, which is this one here, our proposal is a market-led proposal. The environmental conditions have been satisfied. We've got all the technical and scientific reports. It is the same wetland that Lot 9008 abuts on. There is no difference, and we have evidence now of what that looks like. And that'll do me. I think I've covered everything I need to say.
Okay, I think there are others of your team who Mr. Teo highlighted wish to present. You've got about 15 minutes left of your 30.
Thank you. Just to continue, in terms of the site's local context, as John alluded to, Hammond Road itself, it is planned. It's a Category 1 blue road under the MRS. We're talking about the next tier down from something like Tonkin Highway. So what you see at the moment is not what you see in the future, and that really needs to be taken into the context of the site. We actually don't abut any residential dwellings at all. The site itself is opposite the Hammond Park Primary School. The closest buildings at the school, 120 metres away approximately. And the orientation of that school is towards the north of their site, towards Eucalyptus Drive. So, we are in fact a site that has isolation. And that's part of the reason why we've gone down the path of pursuing a development application as opposed to a structure plan. The idea of doing this through a development application provides the planning framework a lot more rigor and certainty in terms of the uses that are proposed. We're only dealing with a set number of uses. Had we done a structure plan, we'd be looking at some type of commercial zone, and that would open the land uses to a lot more different typologies, which may not necessarily be what we're after or what the community or the planning system needs. So I think in the context of that discussion, we met with the city early on about this development application, and on the basis of all the necessary technical studies being provided, a development application can be considered on its merits. I may just cut my bit short, and I'll lead to Belinda from Maharich and Moore just to discuss some of the planning law considerations.
Thank you.
Thank you, presiding member and members of the panel. My name is Belinda Morich, and I'm a planning and environment lawyer from Morich and Moore Planning and Environment Lawyers. My presentation today focuses on the power of the JDAP to make a determination in this matter in the absence of a structure plan. Some of the conversation today matter in the absence of a structure plan. It's a suggestion that as a threshold issue, a structure plan should be prepared for this site. And for the reasons that I have included in my visual presentation and what I will speak to today, it's our firm view that a structure plan is not only unnecessary in this circumstance, but doesn't fetter the panel in any way in making a determination. Now, there is only one structure plan that is effective in relation to this site, and that is the Southern Suburbs Stage 3 District Structure Plan, or the DSP. Now, that is not a structure plan that's made under Part 4 of the deemed provisions and has instead been prepared to guide more detailed planning at a local level. That DSP was approved by the city in 2012. So we're talking 12 years ago. And it's relevant that subsequent local structure plans that have been prepared and approved propose development in a way that is not entirely consistent with that DSP. Now, a DSP does not have the same statutory weight as a decision-making tool as a local structure plan. And that is because a district structure plan by its very nature necessarily provides broad structure to inform more detailed planning. And as I've noted, the effluxion of time has meant that the DSP no longer holds that same relevance as it might have had 12 years ago. Given the status of the DSP, there is no requirement for a decision maker to slavishly follow the provisions of it. Now, in relation to the local structure plan, an LSP was lodged with the City of Cockburn for this land in 2017, which was 7 years ago. Now, while in theory this LSP is seriously entertained, as that term is understood because it was advertised, the weight to be given to that document must be minimal. The document, while advertised and assessed, was never implemented and therefore has no statutory weight, noting that even if it had been implemented and approved, the extent of the weight that is required to be given to it is only due regard in any event. And to this end, I wanted to specifically refer the panel to the commentary in both the Responsible Authority report, but also in the reasons for refusal prepared as part of the Regulation 13 request, which suggests that the land uses on this site are prohibited. That is legally incorrect. There is no structure plan in place that directs any land use permissibility over the site. The life of a structure plan made under Part 4 of the deemed provisions is 10 years from the date approved by the Western Australian Planning Commission, and that's in clause 28 of the deemed provisions. Since the LSP was lodged and assessed, further residential development has occurred south of the subject land, which has been constructed within the buffer of the wetland, which appears to be at odds with the LSP lodged for this land. And again, this fact suggests that the draft LSP cannot be considered as a contemporary planning instrument to which regard should be had. In our submission, it's our submission that the age of the draft LSP and the fact it was never finalised means that minimal weight should be afforded to it. It's our submission that a local structure plan is not required to determine this application. Clause 27(2) of the deemed provisions expressly contemplates a scenario where a development application is to be assessed in circumstances where a structure plan hasn't been approved. So the panel, as a decision maker, has to be satisfied that the proposed development or subdivision does not conflict with the principles of orderly and proper planning, and that the proposed development or subdivision would not prejudice the overall development potential of the area. The development proposed in this case does not conflict with the principles of orderly and proper planning and does not prejudice the overall potential of the area, which is largely either developed or under current development approval or subdivision approval. It should also be noted that this site is isolated from surrounding development by the identified wetland, and therefore structure planning is not required to provide integration of development or subdivision layout with adjoining land holdings. The definition of a structure plan in the deemed provisions, I say, is actually quite informative to the panel in this regard. The definition of a standard structure plan means a plan for the coordination of future subdivision and zoning of an area of land. In this case, there seems to be very little utility in a structure plan over an area which is less than 1.5 hectares in size. It's surrounded by land which is already being developed and which is proposed to be developed as a single project. We therefore say that a local structure plan is not necessary in this case, and that the JDAP should instead assess the application on the normal principles of orderly and proper planning.
Thank you. You've got about 6 minutes left.
If I can introduce Dawson from Praxis, who's an economist who's looked at the proposal under the SPP 4.2.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Dawson Demasi Hunting. I work with Praxis Economics. We do retail economic analysis. Thank you.
We might need your voice a little louder, please.
Thank you. First, I would like to touch on the analysis we did was a net benefit test under the SPP 4.2 guidelines. I believe in the Responsible Authority report, they referred to it as a needs assessment under the guidelines that shouldn't be undertaken for a development application. However, it was predominantly a net benefit test with a high-level needs assessment to address the demonstrated need requirement of the net benefit test. So we undertook the assessment in line with SPP 4.2, which includes demonstrated need, impact on activity centers and hierarchy under shop retail floor space, net change for community, access impact, and net increase in employment. We use gravity modeling, which is an objective method of assessing the need for retail in an area that has been accepted through WAPC rulings and is used frequently for strategies for local commercial activity center strategies. We assess demand based on benchmark productivity levels for the relevant uses being proposed. We considered all centers that are current and planned within the area, with the exception of 2 centers that are identified in the LCACs, which are within the latitude 32 area and are unlikely to be developed unless there's a significant workforce in that area, which would provide demand for them. And without the small nodes that are identified in the Southern Suburbs District DSP, which are allow a maximum of 300 square meters retail and do not constitute what you would consider an activity center. The impacts were measured against activity centers and not against individual operators. As you can see here, the demand within the catchment is significant. The population growth is expected to be 45% within 10 years and 74% by 2038. The results indicate that there is sufficient demand to achieve viable turnover levels for the proposed uses. All turnover impacts were insignificant according to SPP 4.2 guidelines. Just to clarify, the guidelines indicate that an impact of 0 to 5% reduction in turnover is insignificant. And within a 5-year time frame, all of the turnover levels of the centers that were assessed within the model will return to higher levels than the base case where there is no development. There would be 21 construction jobs developed in the short term and 65 ongoing jobs, including high-skilled jobs through the medical center. I think it's worth noting at this point that the RAR did support that there was need for these uses in their response. They did support that this would provide additional jobs and that this would provide additional amenity, noting that they did say that there were planning considerations that were not aligned, but they did support the findings of the net benefit test. The center would also reduce expenditure leakage and reduce vehicle trips within the catchment. And the results align with the findings from the recently undertaken retail needs assessment for the Hammond Park Neighborhood Center, which identified a gap of retail floor space of approximately 22,000 growing to 33,000 square meters by 2030. Square meters by 2032, I believe. The findings are supported by other contextual analysis. So the local center that was planned to the east of the site has been developed as residential. There is another small node to the southeast, which was developed as a childcare center. These opportunities leave a gap where there needs to be service provision for the local community. And the fact that, as John referred to, the market-led impetus for this site supports the identified demand and need for commercial uses in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. You're pretty close to time, Mr. Teo. I'll allow you a couple more minutes,
Sure.
But if the final presenters could be fairly swift in their presentation.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I'll introduce Paul from PGV Environmental.
My name's Paul van der Mosel from PGV Environmental Consultant, and I'll be very quick. There's about 3 hectares of wetland vegetation on the site, and about 2 hectares, which is about 60%, will be retained in this development, which is mostly the wetland and the buffer. John's already talked about the resilience of this wetland. It is conservation category despite a road and houses being put through it in the past at the top and the northern end. The 15-metre wetland buffer was chosen not just because our neighbours to the south got it. It was actually based on a wetland buffer assessment that our company did. The fact that the 15-metre buffer is the same as the buffer assessment for the southern site is no surprise. It's the same wetland. It's the same wetland vegetation, the same upland vegetation. It's the type of wetland you walk through at any time of the year and you won't get your feet wet. As John said, it's waterlogged. It's a groundwater dependent wetland, so it doesn't need a wide buffer. The 1.2 hectares of vegetation that will be cleared has got Banksia woodland and cockatoo foraging habitat, and 2 jarrah trees, that potential breeding habitat under the Commonwealth's definition. That clearing has been referred to the Commonwealth Department very recently, and we're expecting that they will consider the regional context of this clearing, in that literally over the road to the west we have the Harry Waring Nature Reserve, and north of that Thompson's Lake Nature Reserve, with hundreds if not thousands of jarrah trees and a lot of foraging habitat. So I will leave it at that. Thank you.
I'll just close, thank you, by just simply saying that, based on all the technical information that's been submitted as part of the proposal, there is demonstration that the issues of concern can adequately be mitigated, or the issues of concern don't exist, for example, emissions. A structure plan shouldn't be required to facilitate this development application. We have proven that through technical data that the uses can operate on site without impacting the amenity of the surrounds. I mean, it's also worthwhile mentioning that, of circa 500 submissions, 40% of that was in support. That's not an insignificant amount. We're happy to take questions, and we've got a range of consultants here, so we look forward to question time.
Thank you. And you've also got traffic and bushfire, etc. consultants here if panel members wish to ask them questions.
That is correct.
All right, lovely. Thank you for that presentation. I might invite panel members to ask questions. So first to the elected members, Councillor Dewan, did you have questions?
A number of them, please.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
And when you answer the questions, you're going to have to stand at the lectern.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So there have been a number of presentations from the board, and I'd like to start with Mr. Chris Kennedy, who's, I already asked him the question as to whether he has a commercial establishment. He said yes.
Right.
Now, Mr. Teo had another presentation, so I'd like to ask Mr. Teo. So why did you choose to have a commercial establishment in an area, in a residential area, which is predominantly having the age bracket of young couples up to 30 to 39 with young kids, and bang opposite the primary school, which has 1,200 young minds who are tomorrow's Australian leaders? They will be watching, they will be likely to get into bad habits of fast food, inhaling fumes from the petrol station, and also the Gabler Road, which is already had near misses and accidents. If you check the records of the traffic, people are so fed up with that congestion. And if we talk about commercial establishment coming in proximity to Gabler Road, that will put chaos on that road, number one. Number two, there have been 500 people, residents, who responded to the questionnaire which the city had put forward, and 60% of them were against this development. And the main reason cited by them was, again, fast food, traffic congestion, law and order, which will attract, the 24 operation will attract antisocial elements and all of that. I would like to ask you, Mr. Teo, Western Australia is the biggest state. Why did you choose that site? Just because it was invested in 2005 by a proponent and he wants his return on investment, or it was market led? Because I read somewhere it was market led. I do not see that market led development. I see it should be community led development. And you have bypassed the town planning scheme number 3, which clearly says service station and fast food outlets not permitted. So I'd like to really understand your logic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think to answer, why commercial development, as the owner, Open Minds representative John Del Dosso conveyed in his presentation, it was market led. The owners were approached by commercial entities for these type of uses. So I think that clearly demonstrate that there is a want and a demand from that industry. The prior structure plan in 2017, which was not approved, not finally approved, was for residential. The environment surrounding residential development, coupled with bushfire issues and traffic as well, have rendered that type of structure plan or that land use as compromising. The issues you raise in terms of traffic, or the questions you asked in regard to traffic, the traffic impact assessment that's been submitted has had support from the city's traffic engineers' offices. So there hasn't been any concern with regard to the road capacity or the network, or this proposal impacting the local road network. So I think in regard to traffic, your city officers have supported the proposal in that context. And I think lastly, you commented on the health and some nutrition concerns. I think you may have alluded to those issues in terms of health and nutrition. From a planning aspect, those aren't planning issues which, in my opinion as a planner, are consideration for determining an application. There have been various examples determined by the JDAP of quick service restaurants being located directly next to residential, directly next to childcare centres. Planning ideology has activity centres and schools located in close proximity to each other. Activity centres often have these type of uses as well. So the human behaviour is not something that the planning framework should be governing and making a decision on. John,
I think, sorry, Mr. Teo, I think there was also part of Councillor Doohan's question around the proximity to service stations and schools as well.
Sorry, and in terms of proximity to service stations, so many service stations around the Perth and Peel exist directly next to sensitive uses, residential, childcare centres. These aren't just new, old service stations I'm referring to, but new approved ones. And that's because with technology that's happened over time, there's now a second vapory recovery system that's often installed with these service stations. So the emissions test that's been submitted and provided as part of this application has demonstrated that there are no concerns with regard to emissions or vapours from service stations. So I hope that answers your question. John, would you like to add?
Yeah, if I'd like to respond on a couple of points. First of all of your questions should be equally directed to the Aqua. I'd like to respond. All of your questions should be equal, which you can see. That land was originally all residential.
No. To be fair, the councillor has asked you the question why this particular site, rather than referring back to the Gable Royal presentation.
To answer the question fairly and strictly in line with the question, it is a commercial-led proposal. Every occupier on that site approached us and sought this use on this land. And in terms of the issues associated with these types of uses, there are many existing examples that are proven scientifically and technically sound in every other suburb in Perth. New developments with these types of uses alongside sensitive residential and other uses. This is not new.
Okay.
Follow, please.
Yes, please. If it's a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you agree that it was commercially led and not a residential community led. So thank you for that. The mention of sunflower and wetland. You mentioned sunflower, downline scheme number 7 or 3 rather. And second, it is wetland. So who can answer that question?
Mr. Van der Mosel, I think, is probably the best person to answer that, councillor.
Okay, a sumpland is a type of wetland. And this could also be called a dampland. And the technical difference is a dampland is a basin type wetland that is waterlogged and never has above ground water. A sumpland is a wetland where on an average year you'll get probably ankle high deep bit of water in the wetland for a few months. And then you go to a lake, which is permanent water. So dampland, sumpland, lake, all types of wetlands.
And how did you classify this in your assessment?
I classified it as dampland. John's called it sumpland, but a dampland is waterlogged, or a sumpland is occasionally inundated, meaning the water's above ground.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, does that conclude your questions?
For the time being, yes.
All right, thank you. Councillor Woodenbar, did you have any questions of the last presentation?
No, actually, no questions from me.
Sorry, I don't think your sound is on.
Sorry, no questions from me.
All right, thank you. I'll come back to you, Councillor Dewan. Other panel members, Ms. O'Donoghue?
I just had a question regarding the wetland, sumpland, dumpland. Look, in that assessment, is one sort of wetland or sumpland or whatever you want to call it, is it more valuable than the other?
Yes.
I mean, that's what I'm picking up from reading the submissions.
Most people,
by calling it a sumpland, it almost puts down its value. Would that be fair to say?
they're technical terms that.
Sorry, can you speak up a little bit?
The dampland, sumpland, lake are technical terms that are specific to Western Australia in describing wetlands. Because sumplands have water above ground for several months of the year, you're more likely to get frogs, perhaps some wading birds in the water. Lakes are the most important. Most public will think of a wetland as a lake because it's got water in it for a start, and that water attracts ducks, turtles, the frogs, swans, all sorts of things. Damplands don't have any of those water birds. They don't have any of the frogs. Technically, the vegetation responds to the high groundwater level. So the vegetation that's in the wetland is very different, completely different to the Banksia woodland next to it, because the water level is so high that only particular types of plant species will grow there. Does that answer your question?
Sort of.
Okay. Did you want to follow?
They're still important. It's a conservation category.
I understand what you're
wetland.
saying. I'm just trying to work out whether it has more value, if there's more water, if it is.
It's a conservation category wetland, and I think that's the main consideration. So whether it's a dampland, sumpland, some other form, it's conservation category. What impacts on the environmental values is determining the buffer. So if you have a lake that you've got breeding turtles and ducks that need some vegetation next to that lake to breed in, then the width of that buffer is important. But where you have a wetland that doesn't ever have any water in it, and you don't have turtles needing to walk out in summer and find some dry area to breed in, you don't need as big a buffer. Also, we don't have a water quality issue in a dampland because there isn't any water above ground. It won't be eutrophied, like full of blue-green algae. There's no water. Whereas in a lake or a sumpland, if you have nutrients coming into that water body, it could turn green if the nutrients are high. So, and in that case, having a wider buffer may be important. So the damp land with no above ground water gives us that ability to reduce the buffer to less than what the guidelines say.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that was helpful. Thank you very much. Other questions, Mr. Syme? Did you have questions? Back to you, councillor. You
Thank
had
you.
further question?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is actually the question to the gentleman who demonstrated the net benefit test. So
Mr. Damasiet-Hanin, thank
how,
you.
how is it that there's a divergence in what you are stating in your report and what the questionnaire, the community consultation revealed? 60% didn't want this development, whereas you are saying there's a net benefit test. I didn't quite understand. Can you please point out that Hammond Park as a community, as a suburb, what assumptions did you take? What net benefits do you foresee? Can you please explain that? Thank you.
So we followed the state planning policy 4.2 guidelines for undertaking net benefit test. I think the divergence between our net benefit test and the community are on issues that are not normally considered under SPP 4.2. So for instance, when we're doing an assessment where there's a primary school and some kind of commercial or activity center, that would actually be a positive because it creates an opportunity for multi-use trips. Whereas the community has stated dislike of this proximity. So that's the divergence. In terms of the net benefit test that was undertaken according to the guidelines, we identified that there was demand for these uses, which means that these are catering to community demand for retail where there's currently a gap. And there will be significant growth in that demand over time based on population growth. So there will need to be additional commercial uses provided to provide the level of amenity you would expect from retail and commercial uses. It will provide jobs. So in the short term, construction jobs are most likely just going to be additional hours for people who currently work in construction. But given this is additional commercial land within the catchment, we expect ongoing jobs to be additional to what is planned under the planning framework. The location is addressing a gap, and we use the gravity modeling to assess the number of trips taken, which the distance of trips taken, which this would reduce by placing it in an area where there is a gap in these types of uses. And I believe, and it would also reduce the level of expenditure from the catchment, given the current gap in retail provision within the area. People will be making trips outside of the catchment to access retail goods. This will allow the local catchment to capture more of that expenditure. So those are the types of benefits that we identified and where we identified that there's a positive net benefit test.
All right, thank you, Mr. Syme.
Yeah, can I have a follow-up question on that, please? You based all this on a gravity model, yes?
Yeah.
And you were looking at shop retail floor space?
Yes.
And you were including fast food?
Yes.
As a shop retail
yes.
land use. Did you disaggregate fast food as a particular land use in your analysis, or we're talking about, when you're talking about a demand of 22,000 or whatever, 1,000 square metres in the catchment, wherever the catchment is, that'd be interesting to know, but you're talking about a wide geography. Is that disaggregated into fast food, or is that just for the broad shop retail category?
So we use shop retail, but we use the turnover productivity levels specific to the types of uses that we're looking at to understand the level of the viability of those potential uses locally.
So when you were doing your floor space demand, were you looking at turnover figures for fast food or for shop retail generally? What turnover?
So we use the turnover productivity levels for takeaway food and for convenience store, which is what.
Did you apply that to the whole gravity model?
We applied that to our. No, we applied that to our specific center, and we calibrated other centers based roughly on the types of uses that they have. Okay. And where possible, we used actual data for other centers to make sure that we had accurate calibration for their total shop retail turnover. And as with regards to the impact test, and the gravity modeling, the SPP 4.2 specifically says that it should be done at Pluck 5 shop retail level. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, in a minute, yes, we'll get to the city, yes. I just have one question, Mr. Teo, just as your follow-up to the R13s. You did raise some questions around one of the alternate R13s around some of those conditions of approval. I think it was regarding the need for subdivision and also odour control. Could you just please explain a little further to me your issue regarding those?
Yes, thank you, Presiding Member. I'll happily answer those questions. So I think the recommended condition 4 is in regard to the nature of ceding the nominated wetland and buffer to the Crown as a conservation reserve through a subdivision process.
Yeah.
So I think our response to that is this is a development application before the panel. It needs to be concerned with the development in itself. The issue of the wetland and its management, we say, is fine for implementing conditions through the development for the management of the wetland. But the actual subdivision process and seeding and those sorts of discussions, that's a separate planning issue that's administered through a separate planning process. Would you like to say something?
And then I think it was 32, was it?
Yeah. Look, in terms of the seeding of the land, as a landowner, I have a number of issues with that. My understanding of that condition is it may be implied that the seeding is requested free of cost. Now, that is something I would object to because the land has value in a different context to what was previously asked for. That parcel will be created as a separate lot, and we have already engaged with prospective buyers to purchase that land as an offset. So I'm happy to carve it off as a separate lot, retain it as a conservation category wetland, but I'm not prepared to cede it to the city free of cost.
Okay, thank you.
And just to follow on, the other condition raised was recommended condition number 32, which is in regard to, if odour is detected adjacent to the premises, we effectively have to stop operation. There's simply no, in our opinion, no nexus to that condition when, with all the technical data that's been submitted, we are advising that we're compliant with Australian standards and other regulation around emissions. There are Australian standards and regulations that exist that require these type of uses to comply with. So we ask that condition is more appropriately worded as an advice note as opposed to a condition.
Thank you very much.
If I can add to that.
Yes.
I'm in the job of measuring things. The way that condition is crafted is based on opinion and open-ended. If that condition goes in as a condition or an advice note, it needs a measurable standard.
Okay.
It needs something that we can measure this to and not simply allow one of the local government planners to walk on site and go, I don't like the smell, so I'm shutting it down.
Mr. Del Dosso, I think Ms. Moritz wished to.
Yeah, look, it's probably the same submission, but from a legal perspective, the condition lacks certainty and in the way it's drafted, and leaves the applicant or the owner of the land and the operator at the behest of a subjective test.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Widdenby, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to check, have you looked at doing a wetland reclassification for the CCW?
Mr. Van der Mosel's coming back up to the microphone.
So if I understand the question correctly, you're asking whether we would do a wetland reclassification.
Yeah.
There's no need for that. It is conservation category wetland. We're not impacting on the wetland, so it will stay as conservation category, and as you pointed out, it's a very resilient type of wetland. So no, we're not going for a reclassification.
Thank you. Any other questions of the applicants before we turn to the city officers? Are we all comfortable?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Questions for the city officers? Councillor Dillon, you had some
Yes.
questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is that to the city, can you point out on what page number of town planning scheme number 3 is the fast food and service station not allowed? I've got it here, hard copy, if you don't mind pointing it out. I've got my own analysis, but I want you to please confirm to the panel.
You have to go to the lectern, sorry. It's just so that it's microphoned and then people online can hear.
So in terms of the land use permissibility, essentially because there is no structure plan designating the specific land use permissibility in that for that lot, then the land use, essentially there is no permissibility. However, we would be looking at the compatibility against the residential type land uses. So in that regard, the zoning table, and I can't recall exactly off the top of my head exactly what page it is, but in the zoning table, it does clearly indicate that the fast food outlets, service station are X uses.
Thank you. And through Madam Chair again, follow up. We heard from the panel heard from the proponent that the number of vehicles, are going to be on the Hammond Road in the future, going to be about 30,000 vehicles per day. The panel would like to understand how many years would it take for that population of vehicles to build up, number one. Number two, how much time do you think is going to take to acquire the land from the private operator and have a dual carriageway on the Hammond Road, just like we did in front of the Success and other suburbs, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the Hammond Road upgrade is identified in a future project plan for the city. I understand from our traffic section that certain sections of Hammond Road have been upgraded, but this particular section has yet to be upgraded. We do have the land requirement. We're simply waiting for budgetary considerations. So it's less about the population growth, but more to do with the timing of the project on the city's budget plans in future.
Follow up, please, through Madam Chair. Assuming we have the capital, leave aside the budget constraint.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say we get the approval tomorrow. How much time do you think we can have a dual carriageway, and how far it would be, this proposed development, how far it would be from the Wojak development, which is already approved? The distance between the two developments, and also how much time is going to take approximately to have a dual carriageway on the Hammond Road. Because then it becomes little viable. The project becomes little viable. If it's a dual carriageway, there are 30,000 vehicles in the next 5 to 10 years. And then, things change a bit.
Mm-hmm.
The thinking changes a bit. So,
can you word the question slightly different? Because I suppose under the Metropolitan Region Scheme, it is identified for upgrading road. So once that upgrade,
because I suppose under the road, so once that upgrade of traffic that would speak between the neighbourhood centre and this potential centre, yes.
Okay. Now, my second question through the chair, is it correct that City of Cockburn did not inform the community that the trip generation in a morning peak time is 410 vehicles, and in the afternoon, PM, it's 658 trips in the afternoon peak?
Yeah.
Because Was that?
Yes. Thank you. So let me talk a little bit about the intent of that information session. So the city noted very early on in the piece that this application was garnering significant media attention and also a significant degree of concern amongst our community. So we acted to go above and beyond what is a standard requirement of the regs in regards to advertising in undertaking our own information session. The purpose of that information session was not to debate the merits of the proposal or discuss all of its good features or bad features. It was really just to direct the community with regard to where they can access all documentation, including the consultant plans, basically everything regarding the application on our Comment on Cockburn webpage. So we certainly didn't feel that the information session came across biased at all. It was really just giving the community access to the information.
Thank you. No more questions.
Okay, thank you. I have a follow-up to your question regarding the other regional road. You've obviously assessed the applicant's transport assessment in the context of the road being an other regional road and its future potential. And the applicant has advised us that your technical specialists within the city were comfortable with the assessment that had been done. Was that correct?
Yes, that's what you want. Yeah, so essentially we did have quite a few conversations between the city, the applicant, and also DPLH's transport team, being the other regional road. The city, we did come to a point where the city's traffic team could be comfortable with 2 points of access. I suppose the difficulty was DPLH's transport team was still not supportive of 2 access points.
Right, okay, thank you. At a point. I might actually refer back to the applicant's transport specialist in a minute on that point. But panel members, did you have any other questions of the city officers? Mr. Syme did.
Well, I just
We've
heard a lot about structure planning and the age of particular strategic documents. Amendment 29. Can you just tell me it did not progress?
28.
Is it 28? Okay.
I believe.
Can you explain to me a little bit about that?
Yes, certainly. We weren't around at that time. It's quite a number of years ago. However, my understanding is that, and we're certainly sympathetic to the applicant, that the city sought to have the wetland included within a development contribution plan, which would then provide the applicant compensation at the time of subdivisional development, where we would then be able to obtain that wetland for management. Unfortunately, the WAPC did not agree to that. I believe at the time it was inconsistent with state planning policy, so that didn't eventuate.
Mr. Syme?
Something a bit similar, the local structure plan 2017, WAPC requested modifications. What were the nature of those modifications?
My understanding is that they required a 50-metre buffer to the wetland and other minor mods. Did you know?
There was
So
some.
the LSP, what's the buffer in the LSP?
50 metres to the conservation category wetland.
Okay, so
yeah.
what modifications to that did the WAPC require?
I believe the number of mods. Yeah, there were quite a few.
There was a couple regarding bushfire, some more administrative type mods. A lot of them, I suppose, weren't maybe too material to the actual structure plan. Yeah,
I think when the applicant discusses that they weren't supportive of the structure plan, it's because it did impose the full 50-metre buffer. But that structure plan identified residential R60. So the city is comfortable with a residential outcome for the site. But we do note that the imposition of the full 50 was perhaps not given rigour as it was for the lot to the south, which imposed the 15 metres.
So the commission was not looking at changes of substance as to land use. They were looking at changes to buffer conditions and some administrative conditions.
And
is that a fair summary?
Yes, I believe that's the case. Yeah, correct. The land uses themselves, I don't believe were raised as any issue in terms of being residential.
All right, thank you. Any other questions of the city officers? All good, thank you. I'd like just at the minute, I would like to ask a question of the traffic consultant, please, just in response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come back. Just in a follow-up to that question around the other regional road and the compatibility of these sorts of uses, the subject of this application, the other regional road, and just to unravel for me, the city's traffic engineers were comfortable with the assessment and 2 access points. We hear that the DPLH were not. So what is the resolution of that issue, please?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much for the question. There was a fair bit of toing and froing between the consultant team and the city. The proposal for full access crossovers was basically reduced down to having a exit-only crossover for the fuel tanker to come out of the service station site onto Hammond Road, and then a left-in, left-out only crossover to the very south of the site to cater for the other traffic. The main reason we, as a consultant team, are pushing for the 2 crossovers is the ability for the fuel tanker to enter and exit the site without having to unnecessarily traverse through the site, mixing with light vehicle traffic, pedestrian traffic as it passes the other sort of fast food sites or the like. We'd want the tanker to be able to come in and then come straight out. Now, the city officers were comfortable with that, and they could certainly see the safety benefits as far as that's concerned. The department, however, I guess were constrained by their policy, DC 5.1, which certainly discourages access from developments onto regional roads. But one of the main key considerations of policy DC 5.1 is that the effect of the proposal on traffic flow and safety will be the primary consideration. Now, whether we have 1 crossover, 2 crossovers or 5 crossovers, the traffic generation from the site doesn't change. We're proposing a crossover that is as far south as possible from the Gabler Road intersection, so the maximum possible separation. The secondary crossover is for exit only, so effectively there'll be no impact on traffic on Hammond Road in terms of the network performance. And certainly fuel tankers generally only service these sites in off-peak periods anyway. So we certainly feel that from an overall safety perspective, as far as the development is concerned, minimising any cross activity between fuel tanker and other vehicles visiting the site, having the 2 separate crossovers, but 1 as an exit only is certainly the best outcome as far as safety is concerned.
Thank you for that. Mr. Teo, did you wish to add anything to Councillor Dua's question regarding the structure plan, Mr. Symes' question regarding structure plan and modifications?
I would through John, because he was.
If it's very, very brief.
Yes. Okay.
Up at the left.
The local structure plan that was submitted and approved by the council included the excise of the northeastern corner of the urban lot. And the intention was that we would be able to build a house in that northeastern corner, and then that house would incorporate the wetland as 1 lot. So we could then sell the property as a lifestyle lot, including the wetland, with all its normal obligations for maintenance and care. That's the modification that that WAPC requested. The objective of that is that it will effect on the financial feasibility.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Requested on the financial feasibility.
Sorry, can I just ask another question of it?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, I apologise.
Sorry. I think we finished with the consultants.
Does the city have a commercial centre strategy?
Yes, we do.
How old is it? Does it incorporate the sort of demand figures that we're talking about here? It took 30,000 odd by 2030. in the broader geography that a catchment might be.
It doesn't contemplate this site as a commercial.
No, that wasn't the question. The question was, does
Yeah.
it accommodate, does it, I know that it doesn't accommodate this project. That's clear. It's an out of centre. The question is, does the commercial centre strategy allow for the sorts of demand figures in the broader geography of a catchment of this area that has been identified by Praxis?
Look, I'm not entirely sure. I do know that the local commercial centre strategy is based on the hierarchy of centres under SPP 4.2. And it does identify those centres in accordance with the district level structure plans. I'm not confident that those figures, would be, different if this centre is being.
No. How old is
2012?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
For who?
Oh, sorry, please stay there. We have one more question and I think we might be all done.
Yeah, look, it's just about the buffer. It's probably in the report, but can you confirm that you'd be looking for how you've got a 15-metre buffer to residential to the south? What would you be looking for here?
Oh, that's a big
I've had a look through your conditions, can't see anything referring to the buffer.
In terms of the commercial development as
Sorry,
it is, in terms of the commercial development as it is, what would be an acceptable buffer? Is that the question?
Yeah, you would require a buffer, but how wide?
Yeah, look, we'd be looking to uphold the 50-metre requirement, unless there was, I suppose, some significant greater detail confirming that there was going to be no risk of contamination, runoff, littering, which we found it difficult to kind of determine based on the information provided.
So can I just follow up that? Based on information that's provided so far, you're not satisfied that 15 metres is a satisfactory buffer?
Correct. Yeah.
You're defaulting back to 50.
Sorry, just to be clear, however, the R13 that you have provided accepts the plans as submitted for the application.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an inconsistency there, I think, in your responses.
Sorry, I just missed that question.
Well, the plans that have been submitted factor in a 15.15 buffer.
Mm-hmm.
And, the alternate R13 that you have provided accepts those plans as being the subject matter of the approval, but requires a number of technical studies to be prepared. So I feel like there was an inconsistency there in the responses.
Noted, yeah. Requesting as an alternate recommendation for approval a 50-metre buffer would be onerous and would change the intent of the proposal. So we provide an alternate accepting the 15-metre, but I believe there's some additional conditions there that talk on management of the wetland and avoidance of any pollutants.
Right, thank you very much. Just for clarification, I think there was some confusion around that. Thank you.
It's up to us.
Hmm?
The short answer is it's up to us.
Indeed, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, are we all done with questions now of both officers and the applicant?
Yes.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Now, the way that we must proceed, according to the regulations, is to look first at the recommendation from the responsible authority, which is contained in our original report. However, reminding the panel members that there are two alternate R13s which provide wording for approval with conditions and also wording for refusal with more appropriate wording, which explains those reasons for refusal in more detail. However, let me see first if there is a mover for the motion, the recommendation which is contained within the RAR. Councillor Dewan, is that seconded? There's no seconder for that, so therefore that motion then falls away. So then I look for an alternate recommendation. Would anybody like from the panel to move an alternate recommendation, please?
Yeah, I'll move the alternate, I forget which one, to approve the development.
You'll move to approve?
Yeah.
Councillor Wittenbach, thank you. So that's the R13 alternate to approve. Moved by Councillor Wittenbach. Is that seconded, please? I'm comfortable to second that for the purpose of discussion. Thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor, please?
Yes, and apologies for my voice. I think a 15-metre buffer in the context of this CCW is appropriate. I think 50 metres is being a little bit too conservative. I don't see how there'd be any significant environmental risk with this proposal. I think the management for traffic is appropriate, and I don't believe that the concerns around fast food and odour or emissions from the service station are relevant or likely to be significant in the context of the local environment. I don't see really many issues with the proposal, and I think it would be nice for the residents to actually have a service station and some other alternative shopping locations within the suburb.
Thank you, Councillor. As seconder, I've given serious consideration to this, and I thank the local government for providing those alternate R13s, because it did give us the opportunity to really test, I think, the reasons for refusal in more detail that you had originally put forward. And I find myself in a position unable to support a number of those reasons for refusal. I'm cognizant that this is a single site, a small site in a single ownership, and I therefore find the need for a structure plan not to be necessary. And I do believe that the development application that has been prepared and presented contains a great deal of detail and a lot of technical reports, which I think go over and above what would normally be expected for a structure plan, where the uses might be fairly broad. So we do understand a lot of the technical information associated with this development application, and can therefore satisfy ourselves around any conflicts, impacts and benefits, etc. I find that the proposal and the technical matters which have been raised do deal with environmental issues, and note that there are other pathways for environmental approval that the applicant has actually identified through the other Commonwealth and state legislation that they are following. That sits outside our planning process. The land uses, I'm comfortable with the benefit analysis that has been done. I don't believe that, having looked at that, I don't believe that that necessarily threatens any other centres within the area, and obviously the area is becoming very well established, and therefore other avenues for potential centres have been closed off due to other forms of development. So I'm comfortable with that analysis, and that there is capacity for these land uses. I'm satisfied with the traffic explanation and the discussions that have gone through with the city's officers and the Department of Planning, and that there are means through the process of the alternate and the conditions provided to resolve any outstanding matters appropriately through those conditions of approval. And I don't believe that that should stand in the stead. I find most of them reasonable, perhaps with the exception of a couple that have been identified, but we can get to that through the course of the debate. So that's all I have to say on the matter. Would anybody else like to comment?
Yes, look, I've given this proposal a lot of thought. and I've listened very carefully to the arguments presented by the applicant. I did have some initial concerns about the lack of strategic planning for this location, but I also am, having heard everything that's been said, I'm just conscious of the amount of time that has passed since strategic planning has been put in place. And I'm not sure about the need or the relevance of providing a structure plan over what is effectively a fairly small piece of land. I think that the issues pertaining to the damp land, wetland have been well addressed, and I think that that can be managed quite well, as is also the traffic issues that in addition to that, I am conscious of may arise actually, well, not may, Hammond Road is a residential area, and particularly a primary school located opposite the site, but I don't have any great concerns about the sorts of uses that are proposed being affected by the location of that school. And likewise, I also acknowledge that there has been under the district structure plan a local centre identified 750 metres to the south, which has been recently approved. But I see the uses being proposed on this site somewhat differently, and I think they will service an area that is growing and will continue to grow over the coming years. I would like to, well, I was going to suggest an amendment to delete condition 32, because I do agree that it is quite subjective. I don't know whether you want to deal with that now or after.
We can call for amending motions once, I think,
Mr. Symes.
yes,
Yeah,
Mr.
so I'll
Symes.
just finish my comments there.
Oh, all right then, okay. I might just see if anybody wanted to speak against the motion.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to speak against the motion before we go to Mr. Syme?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I appreciate the work that the team has done in this development. It's been lingering on since 2005. And the issues that probably I have, and I was also conflicted on this way or that way. I spent the last three days going through that. And ultimately, the reason I'm speaking again in favor of the officer's recommendation RAR is because A, the due diligence process of going through the local council was not followed, number one. The local council town planning scheme 3 it takes care of public consultation. It takes care of the neighboring issues, the traffic issues, the environmental issues, and the whole sorts of other issues. And that's the whole purpose. This local planning scheme was made as per the Planning and Development Act 2005. There was a purpose for this little document, that the local government is best suited to plan for the development. Now, yes, fast food is not a planning issue, I do agree, but it is an ethical issue. The likes of McDonald's, KFCs have been opening throughout the world every second day. What is it impacting? It's impacting the health of our upcoming generation. But who cares? It doesn't meet the planning consideration. Fair enough. Any development in any suburb is governed by the local town planning scheme, as I said. Structure plan in this instance is the Hammond Structure Plan 2017 that defines the land use of all land available in the suburb. Southern Suburb District Structure Plan has to be referred to. State Planning Policy 2.9 has to be referred to, and whole sorts of other planning policies. Let me share the general attributes of the suburb for the knowledge of the panel. That's what I'm speaking against. It's primarily a residential suburb. I've been staying in that suburb, near that suburb for 20 years, and I've seen the growth of that suburb rapidly. And I said the predominant age group in that suburb is parents in the age group of 30 to 39 with young children. The Hammond Park Primary School has got 1,200 plus students who are day in and day out going on the Gabler Road, walking on the Gabler Road, looking at this development, looking at the fast food. Yes, I do agree the parents have to control their children, but here you are enticing them, that's why I'm speaking against. Now, in terms of the traffic issues, I don't think there has been, I'm not satisfied that the traffic management has been catered for the growth of traffic in the next 5 to 10 years. and traffic is a perpetual problem in the city of Cockburn. The parking is a perpetual problem in the city of Cockburn. So the local planning policy knows all of that, which perhaps has been missed out in this debate today. Commercial activities, I welcome them because end of the day, you need services, you need products for the local community. But look at Hive IGA Center. There are shops vacant. What does that imply? That there's enough for the current population and we don't need such a huge commercial development at this point in time. And plus, 24 hours operation of fast foods will bring in antisocial elements to the very safe and suburb where kids play in the botany park and people cycle down. It's going to impact that adversely. Another fact, fun fact, Hammond Park is approximately 4.3 square kilometers area. It has 10 parks covering nearly 10.3% of total area. So the green canopy, tree canopy we talk about, we want to protect the environment, it's only 10.3%. And you take away this 30,000 square meters, it will reduce further.
Sorry, I think there's a misunderstanding there. This isn't 30,000 square meter development, but do continue speaking on other matters.
As I pointed out earlier, there has been numerous incidents on Gabler Road because the students walk there with their parents and sometimes they are not having parents with them, the year 6s and year 5s, and it's a risk to the children of my community. Now, these detriments can often be mitigated through careful planning, urban planning, zoning regulations, and collaboration between developers, local authorities, and the school community. It is, however, extremely arduous to coordinate all these agencies, which we faced. Even to get a crosswalk in Hammond Park, it took us 3 to 4 years. Imagine such a big development, how much time it will take. That's why I asked the question to the city that, yes, what time frame, and I did not get the answer. I conclude by saying that the development application has been intentionally sought to diminish the statutory significance of the planning instruments by choosing not to undertake the modifications required by the WAPC to finalize the local strategic plan. On the contrary, the developer has relied on deemed provisions under the local planning scheme regulations that circumvent strict application of city's local planning framework.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Mr. Syme, you wish to speak on the matter?
Yes, look, for me, this is very much an on-balance decision. There's a long list of agencies that are either opposed to it or have significant concerns. DBCA, land use is not recommended, were 15 metre buffer is inadequate. EPA concerns with the reduced buffer. Department of Health concerns about the separation distance with the service station. Department of Education opposed. DFS has got concerns with the BMP. That's a long list of concerns that unreasonable concerns that has been aired. Also, it's quite clearly contrary to SPP 4.2. It is an outer centre development. There's a general presumption there of against those. So there are significant issues on the negative side of the ledger. On the other hand, I do accept that the technical advice which has been provided by the proponent is of high quality. And I think that the areas have been addressed probably quite well. I think if we start with the more concerning ones, which is the environmental ones, because I think the traffic is a traffic issue. It's straightforward. That's a matter of design of management. I think it's been addressed reasonably well. The environmental ones I think are more tricky, and they have to do with water management and they have to do with the buffer. I do take a fair bit of comfort from Mr. Van der Mozel on his submission that the nature of the the damp land as a damp land means that the buffer is adequate. And I think that level of information is important and probably is crucial. I think also regarding the annual general land uses and its position in the hierarchy, the retail centres hierarchy, it's a bit of a pity that the commercial centre strategy of the city is now 12 years old. Things have moved on a fair bit since then. And I must say, from a retail planning point of view, given the emerging nature of Hammond Road, which is a fairly not very attractive through Rolling Road and the other roads will be, the connecting roads will be very busy or much busier. So Hammond Road, I think at 25,000, 30,000 cars a day, probably will be more than that. In that context, this land use isn't a bad land use. So if you were doing a proper commercial centre strategy, would this land use on this site be reasonably contemplated? To be fair, the answer is probably it would be. So on those balance items, I think that this can be approved. Well, I can vote for it. I'd like to move a couple of amendments.
Yes,
First
please.
of all, condition 32.
Yes.
I agree that that's, well, I'll move that and see if there's a second.
Okay, and what are you moving to delete it?
I'm moving to delete condition 32.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that, please? Yes. Thank you, Ms. O'Donoghue. Do you want to speak to it, Mr. Syme?
Yeah, briefly, I think as the proponent has said, it's an uncertain it is an uncertain condition. It could possibly be a nice note, but I think it just should be deleted. I think there are plenty of other mechanisms in the statute that allow these things to be odours and so on to be properly managed.
Thank you. Ms. O'Donoghue, a seconder. Did you wish to speak to that?
No, that sums it up for me as well.
So just on the amending motion, can we please vote on that? That's by Mr. Syme and Ms. O'Donoghue to delete condition 32. Those in favour of that amending motion? Okay, that's Councillor Whittenby, Mr. Syme, Ms. O'Donoghue and Ms. Hyde. Those against? Councillor Dewar, that amending motion is carried 4-1. Thank you. Mr. Syme, did you wish to?
Yeah, look, I would also like to delete condition 4.
Would you like to find a seconder for that?
I'd like to find a seconder for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donoghue. Would you like to speak to it, Mr. Syme?
Yeah, look, I don't think we're in the business of giving land to the Planning Commission for no reason. I think that land has a value is important. I don't think it's something that can, as part of this, certainly not as part of this approval. It doesn't belong here as part of this approval.
Thank you. Mr. O'Donoghue?
I agree. I think it's unjustified in this instance, given the nature of the development.
Thank you. Yes,
Can I
Mr.
speak
Dewar,
against the
please speak a bit against it. Yes.
So essentially, it's saying that prior to issue of any building permit, a subdivision application must be approved by the WAPC to facilitate the process of ceding the nominated wetland and buffer to the Crown as a conservation reserve. Now, this condition, I would say that as per the city planning policy, that's as per the local planning policy, that this is the process. So that's why I will be voting against this amendment. I would like it to be retained because it's as per our local planning policy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Whittenby, did you have anything to say on this proposed amending motion?
No, I think it's fine. I'm happy with it.
Thank you. I'm also comfortable with it. As previous speakers have proposed, I support their points of view. So let's vote on this amending motion only, that is to delete condition 4. Those in favour of deletion, those against deletion, that motion is carried 4-1, noting that Councillor Dewan was against. Thank you. Any other amending motions, please? All good. Well, in that case then might offer Councillor Whittenbar the opportunity to close the debate. Thank you.
I'm okay unless anyone wants to hear me ramble for another 5 minutes. I think we've been here for long enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So let's vote on the motion on the table to approve with conditions as amended. Those in favour, please. That's 4. Those against, Councillor Dewan against. The motion is carried 4-1. Thank you. Just returning ever so briefly then to our agenda. And we have no matters before us in terms of Form 2 and none in terms of SAT recommendations under Section 31. Part C, there being no general business, I therefore would like to thank everybody for their patience today and their respect for all the speakers and all the contributions made by everybody, and draw the meeting to a close at 11:20. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.